When the Civil War broke out, social structures broke and demonstrated women's freedom and how it differed from men. This is the first chance for these women to take control of their own lives, to escape the haven of home and take action on and off the bloody fields of battle. These women shaped their own roles in our nation that we have today, and helped hold this American nation as one. These women redesigned their roles in a time they lived in, and simultaneously made a great impact to help the men in this war, mentally and physically. The American Civil War was not only fought by men. Women soldiers fought in the battles as well. There were different reasons to fight. Some for the excitement of war, others fought alongside their loved ones. As the war raged on, both sides were desperate for soldiers. Soon the women could join the ranks of men without having a physical. Another reason women fought was because of money. The jobs they worked did not pay well. The $13 wage a soldier received was very enticing. A good amount of women soldiers lived below the poverty line, and this job would give them a significant amount of money. Many women had the courage to pick up a rifle and make an impact on the war.
Frances Clayton, also known as Jack Williams. In 1861, Frances Clayton, a native Missourian, changed her name to Jack Williams and enlisted with her husband to serve for the Union. She is most likely to have served in the cavalry and artillery units that fought alongside her husband. She practiced how to swear, smoke, drink, chew, gamble, and walk with the masculine stride. Her husband died in battle at her side, a year after they enlisted. She stepped over his body and continued forward and didn't look back. The men at the camp said she was a good swordsman and horse rider. Shortly after her husband died, she was shot and wounded. Her partner tried to help her, but noticed that she was a woman. After this discovery, she was just discharged from the army. Later, she lived in Michigan and tried to return to a normal life, but she struggled because of a lot of media attention towards her. She wished to go re-enlist in the army, but was denied.
Sarah Emma Edmonds. At the age of 16, Sarah Emma Edmonds left Brunswick, Canada, and escaped her abusive father and an arranged marriage. Ever since she was young, she had wanted to cross-dress. She crossed over to America dressed as a man and started to work as a traveling Bible salesman in Connecticut. She heard about the war and quickly enlisted. She started as a male nurse for the Union under the name Franklin Flint Thompson. She worked back and forth as a nurse and a courier. One day, the position of a spy became open, and she took the chance, and her experience gathered significant information for the war about the Confederate Army and what it was planning. As a spy, one of her alter egos was an Irish peddler, Bridget O'Shea. On one particular mission, she stole a beautiful horse, but was shot on her way back to safety. In 1863, Edmonds' regiment was preparing for Battle of Vicksburg, but she developed malaria. She didn't want to lose her identity of being a woman, so she went back to a private hospital. When she came out of the hospital, her male identity, Private Frank Thompson, and was enlisted her name as a deserter. She could not return to her regiment, so she returned to Washington and worked as a female nurse. She would later return to Canada and fall in love with Lana Seal. They then moved to the United States with her husband and 3 sons. After everything that had happened with the war, and being upset that she was being labeled as a deserter, she took the case to court and gained an honorable discharge.
Catherine Davidson. In September of 1862, Catherine Davidson fought in the Battle of Antietam as part of the 28th Ohio Infantry. During the battle, she was wounded in her right arm, and the governor of Pennsylvania came to help her. Davidson thought she was near death, and so she handed the governor her ring. Then she was discharged. After Antietam, she was in Philadelphia, and she called for the governor who she'd met during Antietam. When he arrived, Davidson told him that she was the soldier that had given him the ring that day at Antietam. He was shocked, because he had no idea that it was a woman who gave it to him. Davidson proved that it was her ring, and when the governor tried to return it, she refused to accept it, saying, "The finger that used to wear the ring will never wear it any more. The hand is dead, but the soldier lives."
Poets. Poets during this time heard about what was going on in the war through loved ones, pictures, and newspaper headlines. These poems told of how the nation was feeling from the viewpoint of the Union, the Confederates, the African Americans, and the women. Many of the poems had themes relating to how devastating the war was for both sides.
Somebody's Darling by Miss Marie Lacoste. Lacoste was a poet and a nurse for the Confederates, and her fiancé was a captain for the Confederates. She wrote this poem about both sides and how the mothers felt about these battles. Somebody's darling was born one day. Somebody's darling was so young and so brave, wearing still on his wet yet pale face, soon to be hid in the dust of the grave, the lingering light of his boyhood grace. Somebody's darling, somebody's pride. Who will tell his mother where her boy died?
Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. Frances was born in 1812 in Baltimore, Maryland, which was a free state at the time. But her mother died when she was 3, so she lived with her uncle, who was a strong civil rights activist. Her uncle, William Watkins, was a teacher at the Academy of Negro Youth, who influenced her greatly. She got her first job as a seamstress at 14. She moved to Ohio and worked as the first teacher at the Union Seminary. She was an active member of the Underground Railroad, where her house acted as a safe haven for the travelers. This influenced her writing, and from this experience she became an activist. She published her first book of poetry at the age of 20 in 1860. She then married Felton Harper, who was 35. He was a widow with 3 children. They had 1 daughter together. However, he died 4 years after their marriage. Once her husband died, she went back to lecturing about women's suffrage and read her poetry. Her first novel, which was very popular, was called Iola Leroy, and was published when she was 67. She gave a moving speech before the National Women's Rights Convention and demanded for equal rights among all people. She died February 22nd, 1911, at the age of 86. Make me a grave where you will, in a lowly plain or a lofty hill. Make it among earth's humblest graves, but not in the land where men are slaves. I could not rest if around my grave I heard the steps of the trembling slave. His shadow above my silent tomb would make its place of fearful gloom.
Letters. Men took every chance they could to write to who they loved, just to let them know that they were still alive. The people who received the letters were filled with relief to know if their loved ones were alive.
To Amanda N. Morris, from J.C. Morris, part of the 21st Texas Cavalry, at a camp near Lanier, Arkansas, on May 10th, 1863. To let you know I am among the living. I never wanted to see you half as bad in all my life as I do now. I would give anything in the world to see you and the children. My love and 1,000 kisses to my own sweet Amanda and our little boys. How my heart yearns for thou that are so near and dear to me. Goodbye, my own sweet wife, for the present. As ever your devoted and loving husband, J.C. Morris.
In hospital number 12 in Nashville, Tennessee, Henry wrote to his close friend Maggie. In the letter, he tells her how much he misses her dearly and finds much enjoyment out of every letter she sends him. She was a symbol of hope for him, like many loved ones were to soldiers. She was his strength to get through the war, and at the end, she would be there waiting for him.
To Maggie Stewart, from Henry Ruse, Hospital number 12 in Nashville, Tennessee, May 7th, 1863. Once more, with great pleasure, I embrace a few moments to write you a short letter. Your letters are received by me with a great pleasure, and a beating heart always waits a reply. I've written a good many letters to other girls, letters of friendship, but those I write to you. I want you to receive them for more than mere friendship. For let me say that your memory is ever dear to me, and if we never meet again on this earth, I shall ever cherish the fond remembrance of thee, and think of the pleasant hours passed in your society. But let me indulge the hope that we may meet ere long. I cannot yet see much sign of the war closing, but I always try to hope for the best. Well, Goodbye, dear Maggie. Hoping to hear from you soon. I am ever yours, sincerely, Henry. Farewell. Oh no, it cannot be. Direct as before.
Nurses. The job of the nurse was not meant for women at the start. Certain women changed that to make it possible. They showed the men they were just as capable to do whatever the men did to help the war.
Dorothy Dix. Dorothea Dix was born in 1802 and grew up in Hampion, Maine, where she became one of the most well-known social reformers for the mentally ill. She left her house to live with her grandmother at the age of 12 and started to teach at the age of 14. In 1819, she went back to Boston and founded Dix Mansion, a school for girls. There was a separate charity school which was free for the poor girls. After her school was built, she went around to different prisons to help prison mates. She witnessed and documented the terrible conditions in the Massachusetts prisons. She then went all over North America and established hospitals in Canada and the U.S. In 1848, she asked Congress if they would grant her 12 acres of land to build an area that would benefit the mentally ill, blind, and deaf. Both houses approved of the bill, but President Franklin Pierce vetoed it. Out of frustration, she left the States and went to Europe and met with Pope Pius IX. Thanks to her ideas, he established a new hospital for the mentally ill. She returned to the United States in 1856, and then the war broke out in 1861, where she was named the superintendent nurse who set up different stations and recruited nurses and trained the teams. She was very efficient and focused, but she lacked the social skills that were necessary. In 1870, she got malaria and died in her own established hospital in New Jersey on July 17, 1887.
Amanda Aiken. 2 years after the war began, Amanda Aiken started as a nurse with no experience. She grew up in Quaker Hill, New York, and traveled to D.C. to start working. Throughout her experience, she wrote long letters to her sisters and documented her experiences. Nursing at this time was not a profession, but the women and men that took these jobs as volunteers were expected to learn how to be a nurse day by day. Normally, a job as a nurse was only for the upper-class woman, but that soon changed. Her help for the war effort was every day from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. They gave the soldiers medicine and usually took one break to nap and rest around noon. Most of the time, Amanda wrote about how she and other women kept the men happy by visiting them and writing letters and singing and playing music for them. Clara Barton. Clara Barton was born in Massachusetts in 1821. She worked for several years as a teacher and founded her own school in New Jersey in 1853. She did charity work and philanthropy in New England that she had started in Washington. She was one of the first to volunteer and appear at the Washington Infirmary at the start of the war. Once her father died in 1861, she left the city's hospital and went to make a difference and help those soldiers out on the field. Her first welcome of being a nurse was when she came to the Antietam with a wagon of supplies, which surgeons needed desperately. Barton started to organize as the well-bodied men to help the wounded in the camp. She used a lot of her own money for the supplies during the war, and at the end of the war, Congress paid her back. She was always there for the soldiers to talk to about personal problems, read to them, prayed with them, and most importantly, kept their hopes high. As the battles continued, she risked her life by working with the soldiers as she nursed, comforted, and cooked in the field. On July 14, 1863, Barton moved to Hilton Head Island to Morris Island to tend to the sick soldiers, and the amount of people injured increased after the failed attempt by the Union to take over Fort Wagner. She worked as much as she could to help these men and give them fresh food whenever possible. But in return, she got really sick and left to Hilton Head Island. When she got home, she learned of her brother and nephew's death. In March, President Lincoln appointed her the correspondent for Friends of Paroled Prisoners, where she identified over 22,000 missing men by checking the prison parole rolls and casualty lists. In 1869, she went to Geneva, Switzerland, as a member of the International Red Cross, and then in 1881, the American Red Cross was founded, where she was the first president until 1904. After she continued to help others by volunteering in the Spanish-American War in Cuba, then died at the age of 91 in 1912.
Spies. The number of female spies is not determined. It is said that hundreds of women were working during the war. These women smuggled information and medical supplies from side to side. These women changed the course of the war many times, adding a new element of surprise. They improved their own lives sometimes, and other times they helped the war effort and gained success for their side.
Bella Boyd. The tall, beautiful, well-dressed, and wonderful figure Bella Belle Boyd grew up in Virginia. Born in 1844, she had Confederate blood. She became a spy at the age of 17 along with other family members. She was shot and killed a drunk Union soldier and thought it was perfectly right in doing so. She often visited Union camps and got by with flirting. She said that she was able to hear through a peephole at the Union headquarters. When she heard that the Union was about to march, she quickly told the Confederate General Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson, who was in a nearby valley. A couple weeks later, she returned again to a Union camp, where there she learned that the Union Army was about to go attack Front Royal, but as she was turning, the Union soldiers fired upon her. They missed. In her life, she was arrested about 7 times. Once, she was imprisoned in Washington, D.C., then a month later, she was released as a part of a prison exchange. She was quickly arrested once more in July of 1863. She was not a model inmate. She sang Dixie, waved flags from her window, and devised unique methods of communication. In that December, she was released and banished to the South. She attempted to sail to England, but was arrested. She escaped to Canada with her husband, who was a Union naval officer, where they traveled to England together. After 2 years, she returned to America as a widow and a mother. She continued to be a successful lecturer. She titled her show as Pearls of a Spy. In 1869, she married another Union soldier during the war. 16 years and 4 children later, they divorced. 2 months after, she married a man who was 17 years her junior. She died of a heart attack in poverty at the age of 56 in the year 1990. Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman was a short African American with several teeth missing and wore a bandana on her head. She was a slave who lived in Maryland's eastern shore, then left to Maryland and worked proudly against slavery. She was widely known for her great courage that never left out that she was needed to be the conductor of the Underground Railroad. Her protection was her faith in God and her pistol as her side. She left her family and her husband, who she was with for 5 years behind, and she set out to help achieve freedom and returned to the South 19 times with her family and 100 others on the railroad, but never lost a fugitive. Money was set for the people who would capture her, but no one ever did. She didn't stop at the start of the Civil War. She worked multiple jobs for the Union as a nurse for white and black soldiers and was a spy and a scout under the command of Colonel James Montgomery, 2nd Carolina Volunteers. She worked hard and accomplished much, but she only paid $200 for over the course of 3 years, so she supported herself by selling pies, gingerbread, and root beer. Once the war was over, she continued to forge the new lives in freedom. In conclusion, these women fought with passion to win the Civil War. These women fought for the right to show that they were equal to men. They fought in the shadows, and most of all, they fought for their beliefs.